Hi friends, today we'll be stitching the letter from the floral alphabet. Let's get started. For stitching the letter, I will be using the padded satin stitch. Let's first see what is the padded satin stitch. This stitch is used to create raised shapes. It consists in first laying down a layer of stitches called the padding, and on top of this padding we'll be stitching the satin stitch. The padding could be created in many ways. You could stitch it in straight stitches, or I am using the split stitch for the padding. The reason for using the split stitch is my letter is pretty high, pretty big, and long straight stitches just won't look good. Now an important thing to consider when stitching the padding is how raised you want your shape to be. I'm using for the padding 4 strands of thread. This is the only time when you'll be using more than one strand for this pattern. The reason for that is I wanted my letter to be pretty raised, so using 4 strands will give that nice padding in order to achieve this raised letter. Another thing important, very important to consider when stitching the padding is always, regardless the stitch you're using for this padding, your padding should form a 90 degrees angle with your satin stitch you'll be stitching on top of the padding. So as you see, I am just laying down adjacent vertical rows of split stitch, because when I'll be stitching the satin stitch, that will be horizontal stitch, so they will form a 90 degrees angle. As you see in my design, I split my letter into different sections. The reason for that is, for this pattern I am using a serif font. In typography, a serif is that small extra stroke found at the end of the main vertical of the letter. So in my design, if you look, I have those small serifs at the top and bottom, which I'll be stitching a bit different than this vertical section of my letter. The reason for that is I want my final satin stitch to be vertical for those small sections, top, bottom, and for the long vertical section of my letter, my satin stitch will be laid horizontal. So that means when we'll go and we'll fill in with the padding for these small sections at the top and bottom, you'll be stitching horizontally, so you'll be switching the direction of the padding. Now, I know it might sound a bit complicated, but it really is not. What you need to always remember when stitching the padded satin stitch is this rule of the 90 degrees between the padding and the satin stitch. The reason for that, again, is if you don't have this 90 degrees angle, your final satin stitch will not look nice even, and it will be really hard to achieve a nice result. You can check out my detailed video on the padded satin stitch, where I explain and I make a short demonstration on exactly what I mean with this 90 degrees angle. Now that I'm done stitching my padding, I will go on and stitch the satin stitch on top of the padding. How I approach this stage of the padded satin stitch is always starting from the middle of my shape, the shape I'm trying to fill, and work towards the extremities. I first stitch a few parallel lines, left, right, starting from the middle, just to have a rough idea, and we'll create these straight parallel lines that will give me the final straight nice satin stitch. Now I will refer you again with the video I was mentioning earlier, so go on and check it out, because I explain really well in that video how to keep your satin stitch straight. This is the trickiest part, and Most people complain about this. It's not really hard if you just not cheat, but just my way of doing this is holding my thread in the direction I want to place my stitch and then stop the fabric. This will ensure a straight satin stitch. But go on and check this video out. I make a small demonstration there, and it's pretty simple, as you'll see. This is a slow process. Do not rush it. As you see, as I am doing now, go on and first create these parallel lines. This will be your foundation, so make sure these lines are straight, and then slowly fill in the gaps in between. When you reach the bottom, that serif section, just stop, because that section will be stitched at a different angle at a later stage. At this stage, it's just a matter of building up the satin stitch. It's about filling these parallel lines with previously stitched. Now, this is a slow process, guys, I'm not gonna lie. First thing to remember, I had to speed up this video. I'm not stitching this slow, so this is just an illusion. I'm stitching super fast. No, I'm not. It's just to keep this video short enough, digestible. Just go on, fill in, build up your satin stitch. A few things I noticed when I started. I was pretty unhappy with the result. As you see, even now it doesn't look smooth, but as you build up, it will look smooth enough. Now, when to know to stop, when do you stop? You'll know because it will look the right way. So the finished satin stitch should look like satin, and in some light sources it will look more flattering than others. As you'll see, I have some images, some pictures of this pattern finished, and it looks almost like milk. In other light conditions, it looks a bit uneven, so that is normal. Just fill in until you're happy with the result. It should be as smooth as it can be. That's the idea. That's why it's called satin stitch in the end. Give it time, take your time, and as you'll see in the end, it will look absolutely gorgeous and create those nice shadows and that nice raised shape. For the next section, those tiny serifs at the top and bottom of my letter, we will apply the same principle. The only difference here is that we will stitch the satin stitch at a 90 degrees with my padding. So that means my satin stitch will be stitched vertical, because my padding, it's horizontal. So that is the only thing to remember. Another thing, do not overlap with the stitches, the horizontal satin stitch on top. Try to go underneath and apply the same technique as before. Start from the middle of this tiny shape and work your way towards the extremities. Again, stitching parallel lines and slowly building up and filling the gaps in between these parallel lines. It's absolutely the same process. The only difference is the angle, and the shape is tinier, so this will go a bit faster. As you build up the satin stitch, you'll see it will start to look gorgeous. I'm not gonna lie, this is not a one-day project. Don't be fooled by this short video. So it will take time to fill this these satin stitches and make them look nice, but it's totally worth it. Now, moving towards the tiny section in the middle. Now, depending on the letter you'll be stitching, not all letters will have this section, but for this example, again, remember to switch the angle. So just imagine, and I want you to understand why I took these decisions when stitching, because this way you'll be able to apply them in other projects and your own patterns or other people's patterns. Now, if I would be to stitch my satin stitch here horizontally, it will not look nice, because that shape is just too long for a satin stitch. So that's why I had to change the angle. So again, since my padding for this tiny section was horizontal, my satin stitch on top is very vertical, stitched vertical. And I applied the same principle. Just fill in and build up this satin stitch until you're happy with the result. As you see, it's already starting to look gorgeous, and your pattern will look gorgeous too if you give it time and follow these simple rules. This was it for today, guys. Remember, Maker20 at checkout, and you can download the entire alphabet from my Etsy shop. Make sure to check out the other videos for stitching the rest of the elements. Thank you again, and happy stitching!